නිවසේ මෙවැනි මත් පිට රැඳෙන විස බීජ 99.9%ක්ම විනාශ කරන විම් ක්ලීනර්ස්.
Tonight, the right ingredients. Review the PTA and go to the IMF, says the US envoy, if Sri Lanka needs rapid growth.
The PTA no longer conforms to international norms and does need to be revised. Sri Lanka can muddle through, but I'm not sure that's what the people are going to want, an economy that's always muddling through.
Inconclusive data. As cases rise past the 1,900 mark for the first time since mid-June, experts say the Delta variant may not be the cause.
We do not have sufficient data to say Delta variant has contributed to this, but the behavior of the people is not as expected.
Opening up, Sri Lanka lifts airline passenger restrictions, allowing full loads of vaccinated tourists to land.
We have lifted the number of arrivals. Travelers who haven't obtained the required dose of vaccine per aircraft, still the 75 number is limited.
On the right path. Biz confidence stays unchanged in July, as report says that situation more manageable than before due to vaccine rollout. All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Thursday, the 29th of July, 2021.
හඳුන්වා දෙන නව ක්‍රියා ෂැම්පූ තුන්ගුණයක් ක්‍රියාකාරී ඇන්ටි ඩෑන්ඩ්‍රෆ් තාක්ෂණයෙන් ඉසේ සම පෝෂණය කර ඉසුරු ඉවත් කරමින් නැවත ඇතිවීම වළකයි. නව ක්‍රියා ෂැම්පූ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening. Welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Eknaik. Now, US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Lena B. Teplitz, says that Sri Lanka's insistence on using alternative economic policies to weather its economic troubles instead of seeking out the International Monetary Fund may not deliver the rapid growth that the people expect from the government. Speaking to local media this morning, US envoy also said that the Biden administration will support Sri Lanka in reaching out to the fund, which is the only way through the current financial crisis the country faces amid dwindling foreign reserves.
US envoy Lena B. Teplitz hosted a roundtable discussion this morning with Sri Lankan media personnel where a host of burning issues were addressed. Chief among them was the US administration's stance on Sri Lanka's human rights and rule of law, to which the envoy touched on the Prevention of Terrorism Act and its inconsistency with international norms.
My question, it relates to the human rights situation and the rule of law situation in Sri Lanka. How does the US administration view the situation? Is there a change in its stance? Will there be more engagement with the Sri Lankan government on the issue? And in what form will that entail?
Of course, we continue to talk with the government about challenges to human rights. Recent actions, for example, the release of prisoners who were arrested, I think all of them were convicted under the PTA. That was a really helpful and welcome step forward. And I think that, we look forward to the efforts to look at more people who have been detained under that legislation that no longer conforms to international norms and does need to be revised. There are other challenges out there, of course, and I did note that in light of the Supreme Court ruling in 2008, which had upheld the conviction of another one of the pardoned prisoners, that didn't appear to be consistent with SDG goals or maintaining the rule of law.
Further, the US envoy also responded to specific policies being adopted by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka in the hopes of strengthening the country's foreign reserve position.
Recently, the central bank announced plans to permit individuals to repatriate what they termed previously undisclosed income into Sri Lanka, that is to shore up Sri Lanka's dollar reserves. How concerned is the US about decisions like this?
In general, this kind of offer doesn't work in the way people think. It's an open invitation to people to launder money. Maybe that was, obtained in ways it shouldn't have been and has been stashed abroad. Now they have a chance to bring it in and basically clean it by bringing it into the country under that amnesty. But secondly, it usually doesn't raise a lot of money for the government. The government really does have a challenge at the moment. You mentioned levels of reserves, and I think that the solution in the end is not this kind of policy choice. It's not limited repatriations of funds, a much more massive infusion of funding and economic reform is required, and that means going to the International Monetary Fund. That's something that the U.S. government would support Sri Lanka doing.
The US envoy also expressed her opinion on the central bank's reluctance to approach the International Monetary Fund for a bailout and its continued insistence that alternative economic policies will help Sri Lanka weather the storm, saying that Sri Lankans expect rapid growth and not an economy that muddles through.
The central bank recently says that it will not seek a new program in the near future. Then they cite concerns regarding conditionalities, such as maintaining a devalued rupee level, that is to strengthen exports. But the central bank is adamant that, alternative methods may work in easing, for example, the cost of living pressure on the people. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that could work?
I doubt at this point that alternative measures are going to achieve the foundational economic reform that's going to be required for the economy to regain its health and to grow at an accelerated pace going forward without the support of the IMF. Sure, it's possible that Sri Lanka can muddle through, but I'm not sure that's what the people of Sri Lanka are going to want, an economy that's always muddling through. I know that the leadership at the central bank and leadership in government are very attuned to the challenges that the economy is posing today. And I continue to encourage them to look to the IMF as a central part of the economic solution going forward, and to embrace some of the conditionality as a means of helping build that strong economic foundation.
In conclusion, while highlighting concerns on the Port City Economic Commission bill, Ambassador Teplitz stated that although US firms will not be prevented from investing in the Port City project, they will be wary of doing so in an environment that involves corrupt practices.
The United States does have one of the companies that are working on the Port City development on our sanctions list. And of course, companies are going to have to look carefully at the terms of doing business in the Port City going forward and what the legislation means. I believe the last time I spoke with some of you, I expressed concern over the Port City legislation. It was then in draft. It's now been passed. And I continue to be concerned about some aspects of that legislation because there do appear to be openings for either corrupt influences or potential for illicit financial flows, money laundering, and things like that. And of course, we have our Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that makes corruption and the payment of bribes in the conduct of business illegal for U.S. firms. The U.S. is not preventing American companies from investing, but we have been raising concerns about the investment environment for any companies, not just American companies.
අඩසිය වසකට වැඩි ජනතා විශ්වාසය නව සංයෝගයකින් රයිනෝ රෝෆිං සහ සීලිං ෂීට්
11 human rights groups have called for the release of lawyer Hijaz Hizbullah and several others arrested under the Prevention of Terrorism Act for allegedly being detained in the absence of credible evidence. Now, the groups also offered suggestions to the government through a joint statement, such as immediately reviewing the detention of all suspects arrested under the PTA, among others.
11 human rights groups issued a statement yesterday calling for the release of lawyer Hijaz Hizbullah and several others who are currently detained under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The release states that the civic rights activist has been detained under the Prevention of Terrorism Act for 15 months since 14th of April last year, despite the lack of credible evidence. The groups went on to say that Hijaz Hizbullah was arrested by the police for aiding and abetting Inshaf Ahmad, the suicide bomber who carried out the Cinnamon Grand bombing during the Easter Sunday attack, and that the reason for which he was detained has changed several times. The statement further said that the human rights groups are deeply concerned with how the country continues to use the PTA to enable arbitrary detention despite commitments made to repeal the act. The group has also offered suggestions to the government, including guaranteeing the protection of the human rights of all PTA detainees, including guarantees of due process and a fair trial, and protection from arbitrary arrest, detention, torture, or other ill treatment. They also requested that the detection of those held under the PTA be immediately reviewed, while ensuring adequate access to fair trial hearings, to fair bail hearings, and immediate release for all those not facing internationally recognizable charges.
Daily COVID-19 cases confirmed across the country yesterday surpassed the 1,900 mark for the first time since the 24th of June. However, with the Delta variant doing its rounds in the country, concerns as to whether the rise in infections is due to the highly infectious variant were laid to rest by the Ministry of Health. It says that due to a dearth of data to support this argument, it cannot be assumed that the Delta variant is the reason.
With over 60 Delta variant cases confirmed in the country, health authorities continue to stay on high alert in trying to promptly identify and quarantine such patients. In this backdrop, the country's daily coronavirus cases has seen a slow yet steady rise in cases in the past week, with the country confirming 1,940 COVID-19 cases yesterday. The last time the country's daily cases surpassed the 1,900 mark was on the 24th of last month. Off yesterday's case list, the Western Province reported the highest infections with 1,165, once again with the district of Colombo confirming the highest cases of 596. This development, however, has raised public concerns as to whether the country might have to experience an extension to the third wave of the virus, only this time driven by the deadly and more virulent Delta variant. However, speaking at a media briefing today, Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, offered an assurance that the rise in cases may not be attributed to the Delta variant.
It is too early to comment, or we do not have sufficient data to say whether the presence of Delta variant has contributed to this. But however, we know that the numbers are going up, and we have seen in many places the behavior of the people is not as expected and probably conducive for the spread of the COVID-19 disease. So as a result, we would like to urge the public, at least by considering the current trend in which new cases are increasing and the deaths are increasing, and take this fact into your consideration and make sure that all possible measures to prevent the spread of disease should be taken, especially those who are managing the offices and workplaces and commercial premises like the supermarkets, malls and other places where large number of people are expected to gather, to ensure that relevant health guidelines are adhered to.
In the meantime, so far the country has confirmed 2,339 new COVID-19 infections. With the Delta variant continuing to threaten the progress the country has made so far, under travel restrictions, health authorities are currently focused on speeding up the country's vaccine rollout and stay a step ahead of the case numbers. So far, over 8.7 million people have been given at least one vaccine dose, while a further 1.9 million are now fully vaccinated. According to data released by the Epidemiology Unit, over the past 3 days, 1,076,773 Sinopharm first dose vaccinations have been carried out. Yesterday, 344,458 Sinopharm first doses were administered, while 32,288 received their second doses. Meanwhile, the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine was administered to 40,912 people, while 157 others received the first Moderna jabs. Recoveries, meanwhile, continue to keep abreast of the new cases, with Sri Lanka's COVID-19 recovery rate currently standing at 90.61%, way past the global recovery rate according to data released by the Health Promotion Bureau. Today as well, recoveries rose to 273,496 in total, after 1,641 more patients were discharged from hospitals.
In the meantime, the Civil Aviation Authority announced the lifting of the 75-passenger airline capacity today, allowing airlines to carry full loads of fully vaccinated passengers to the country. However, the authority added that the restrictions will remain in place in relation to vaccinated passengers, or in fact unvaccinated passengers.
On the 2nd of May in 2021, the Civil Aviation Authority announced that airlines will only be limited to carrying 75 passengers per flight to Sri Lanka due to the prevailing pandemic situation in the country. However, with vaccinations around the world showing positive results in controlling the virus spread, the authority has decided today to lift the restrictions and allow airlines to bring in their regular full loads once again, but only to fully vaccinated passengers. The decision, however, will not apply to passengers originating from countries that are restricted from entry, such as India and several states in the African continent, including Zimbabwe, Lesotho and Zambia.
Beginning 1st of August, the passengers or any traveller who has obtained the required doses of vaccine and stayed 14 days at the point of origin are authorized to land in Sri Lanka. We have lifted the number of arrivals. Anyone with the 2 doses of vaccine are authorized to land in Sri Lanka. Prior to arrival, they must obtain a negative PCR test within the 72 hours prior to departure. Upon arrival, the travellers are subjected to another PCR test obtained immediately within the few hours and must produce a negative result. So this is about 1 to 2 days upon arrival. With regard to the travelers who haven't obtained the required dose of vaccine per aircraft, still the 75 number is limited.
Meanwhile, with larger number of passengers expected to land in the island through this measure, the health authorities urge passengers to adhere to the local health and safety guidelines.
In general, anybody who is coming to Sri Lanka will be monitored by the Sri Lankan health authorities, and they are expected to get the vaccines approved in Sri Lanka.
Now, in other local stories, following a court order to exhume the remains of Vishalini, a 16-year-old domestic worker who died of severe burns at MP Rishad Badiuddin's residence, a special panel of judicial medical officers has been appointed to carry out the second post-mortem tomorrow. Police media spokesperson Senior DIG AdaDerana said today that around-the-clock police security is placed around the gravesite until the exhumation date. He added that further investigations are currently also underway with regard to several other female domestic workers that had been employed at the former minister's residence.
The court has ordered a second post-mortem in respect of the dead body. The body has been buried at the cemetery at 3rd Division of Western Estate in Diagama area. The police have provided security at the grave at the moment, and security will be provided and continued till tomorrow evening for the exhumation. A special panel has been appointed with consultant judicial medical officers in order to conduct the second post-mortem. In addition to that, the exhumation would be conducted on the supervision of Nuwara Magistrate Court. Investigation officers are going to inform Nuwara Magistrate Court in this connection. In addition to that, another investigation is being conducted in respect of the domestic servants who served at the ex-minister's residence before the decease. 10 domestic servants, women, have been identified as the domestic servants who served at the residence before the decease, and decease is the 11th one. 5 statements in respect of the domestic servants of Diagama area have been recorded by the investigation team yesterday, and we are analyzing the statements given by the victims.
A special unit at the Women and Children's Bureau of the Sri Lanka Police to crack down on online child pornography has detected 17,629 videos and photos since its establishment on the 17th of June. Now, it comes at a time when a rise in the number of crimes against minors has been witnessed in recent months. The police say that stern action will be taken against those involved in uploading such material, adding that punishments will be more harsher if local children are found to have been involved.
With a rise in crimes against minors currently a burning issue that has taken center stage in the recent past, the need to monitor cyberspace and prevent the sharing of any material deemed harmful to children, the Sri Lanka Police have announced a startling statistic uncovered by the department's new online monitoring unit. The unit that commenced operations on the 17th of last month at the Women's and Children's Bureau has been monitoring online content that could be considered child pornography, and flagged over 17,000 posts including photographs and video content. Speaking at a media briefing today, police spokesperson Senior DIG AdaDerana issued a warning to anyone engaged in such acts to stop immediately or risk a long stay in jail.
Within a period of 40 days from 17th of June 2021 to 28th of July 2021, it has been reported 17,629 cases. 17,629 video clips or photos related to child pornography have been uploaded to the internet through various instruments operated from Sri Lanka. We are conducting investigation in order to arrest the persons. So they have committed offences under the Obscene Publication Act. In addition to that, if that particular boy or a girl is a Sri Lankan and if that particular incident happened in Sri Lanka, the perpetrators have committed multiple offences. Therefore, we are going to arrest them and they will be produced before the magistrate under the relevant laws and regulations. Therefore, everyone is requested to not to involve in such crimes, not to upload any items related to child pornography or cruelty to children, not to upload any video clips or photos related to child phonography. Further investigations in respect of these uploading videos and pictures would be conducted by Children and Women Bureau with the support of Criminal Investigation Department.
We will see you on the other side of this break. Bear with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, business confidence levels in Sri Lanka have stayed the same in July compared to the previous month. But with the country's vaccination drive continuing to break records, business activity is expected to improve in the coming months as the country moves closer to a full reopening.
The latest LMD Nielsen NIQ Business Confidence Index survey says that the slow but steady decline in new COVID-19 cases and the pace of the country's immunization campaign may point to signs of stability in corporate corridors despite the index having remained below 90 basis points for 3 successive months. The BCI remained unchanged in July, registering 87 for the second consecutive month, representing a deterioration compared to the corresponding month of last year, when the index stood at 97 and places it more than 20 points below its 12-month average. Nielsen ex-director Consumer Insights, Teresa Mianardenia, says that with the country opening up again and the immunization drive accelerating with more than 30% of the population vaccinated and cases on the decline, the situation is gradually becoming more manageable. She added that people and businesses have more or less overcome the fear that gripped the nation at the onset of the pandemic and are settling down to embrace the new normal. The report also says that economic activity may pick up in the coming months due to the momentum of the island-wide immunization campaign and the receipt of several consignments of vaccines in recent weeks, which could lead to an easing of travel restrictions.
Now, taking a look at the Colombo bourse, the all-share price index gained 43.78 points to end at 8,140.76, while the S&P SL 20 index of more liquid stocks ended at 3,071.54, following a gain of 20.55 points today. Market turnover was 2.4 billion rupees. Now, here's Dimantha Matthew with a brief report on today's market performance.
Today the market turned back into the green with the ASPI moving up by 43 points. Retailers seem to be back into the market. We can see activities of around 27,000 transactions, so very much onto the high side in terms of market activity. Turnover levels higher than yesterday. We are seeing 2.5 billion rupees of turnover, so improving compared to the last couple of days. Bulk of the turnover is coming again from the material sector, capital goods sector, and of course the transportation sector. We are seeing a lot of activity in the food, beverage and tobacco segment as well. Overall, we are seeing investors coming back into the market and there is a lot of trading taking place. Activity is also concentrated on blue chip counters as well, because you can see that the S&P SL 20 index is also up by around 20 points.
The rupee, meanwhile, remained unchanged at 202.89 cents against the US dollar today. Now, let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. We'll see you shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, England is allowing fully vaccinated tourists from the European Union countries and the United States to arrive in without quarantine from next week as a measure to boost its tourism sector affected by the pandemic. In the meantime, Pfizer is planning to apply for an emergency booster dose in the early August, as it is said to have the potential to develop protection against COVID-19.
Pfizer has raised its full-year sales forecast for the COVID-19 vaccine developed with Germany's BioNTech by 29% to $33.5 billion as nations stock up on doses for the rest of the year. The company also said it could apply for an emergency use authorization for a potential booster dose as early as August, reiterating that a third shot will likely be needed to enhance protection amid a resurgence in infections in many countries. Pfizer also said that new data shows that a third dose generated virus-neutralizing antibodies more than 5 times higher in younger people and more than 11 times higher in older people than from 2 doses. In the meantime, England is to allow fully vaccinated visitors from the European Union and United States to arrive without quarantine from next week in a huge and long-awaited boost for airlines and travel companies. The government said in a statement that from the 2nd of August, travellers with US and EU-approved vaccines would not have to pass the quarantine process. The opening up of England would likely be followed by the rest of the United Kingdom. However, the travellers still have to take a COVID-19 test before departure and soon after arrival in England. Meanwhile, Pakistan is to ban air travel for anyone without a COVID-19 vaccine certificate from the 1st of August and will require all public sector workers to get vaccinated by the 3rd of August. From the 1st of August, unvaccinated people will no longer be allowed to enter government offices, schools, restaurants and shopping malls. Further, teachers and students above 18, public transport and retail staff are also required to get vaccinated by the end of next month. Pakistan has seen a spike in COVID-19 infections dominated by the Delta variant, and its poor health infrastructure is under extreme pressure. The government, however, has ramped up the drive, especially in the Heartland Punjab province, with 850,000 doses administered yesterday across the country.
Now, rescuers in India's northern Jammu and Kashmir territory were scouting for survivors today after flash floods triggered by cloudburst left at least 7 dead and 19 others missing. The Kishtwar district in the region was ravaged by massive floods which damaged houses, uprooted trees and destroyed property. Reports say that an Indian Army and State Disaster Response Force teams were carrying out rescue operations in the region to search for survivors and recover bodies, if any. Meanwhile, the water level in the Ganges River in India's northern Kanpur city crossed the danger mark due to recent heavy rains. More than 160 people have died in India during the past week as a result of heavy rains. Annual rainfall is essential in India as rains support 2/3 of the 1.3 billion population living in rural areas who rely on farming, but excessive rainfall has caused problems like floods, landslides and waterborne diseases. Plumes of smoke filled the air in the Turkish coastal resort of Marmaris today after a fire broke out in the forest close to residential area. Footage showed the flames raging in the forest near houses and hotels. The fire broke out in the popular tourist destination as authorities were fighting a separate massive blaze in Turkey's southern Mediterranean coast, where 3 people were found dead and 10 others were stranded. Hot weather and strong winds have caused blazes to spread around another town in Turkey, forcing the evacuation of several settlements yesterday. Firefighters continue to battle a raging forest fire in southern Turkey for a second consecutive day. Authorities said 18 villagers were evacuated in Antalya. A shallow earthquake of magnitude 8.2 struck the Alaska Peninsula late yesterday, prompting tsunami warnings in the region. Now, U.S. Geological Survey said the quake, which struck at 10:15 p.m., was at a depth of 35 kilometers under the ocean. In Alaska, the National Tsunami Warning Center issued warnings for southern parts, the peninsula and Pacific coastal areas from the Hinchinbrook's entrance to Unimak Pass. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center also issued a warning for the U.S. state of Hawaii and the U.S. Pacific territory of Guam. The NTWC said that it was evaluating the level of tsunami danger for other U.S. and Canadian Pacific coastal areas as well. The European Mediterranean Seismological Center estimated the quake at a magnitude of 8 and a depth of 10 kilometers. The USGS had earlier pegged the magnitude of the quake at 7.2. An unusual hailstorm hit southern Brazil yesterday as videos uploaded to social media showed driveways and cars blanketed in ice. A new polar air mass is set to move over Brazil's agricultural areas this week, threatening further damage to coffee and sugarcane crops already hurt by strong frosts last week. Now, this would be the third cold wave to bring freezing conditions to Brazil's southern farm belt this winter, something not seen in decades. Brazil has already been suffering through one of its worst droughts in 90 years and dealing with transportation, logistic delays and exports of key crops like coffee to various destinations. The forests were the strongest, or frosts I should say, were the strongest since 1994 and have already damaged up to 200,000 hectares of coffee fields, prompting Arabica coffee futures to rise nearly 10% at the beginning of this week after gaining almost 20% last week. The air mass reached southern Brazil yesterday. According to forecasts, it is expected to move to key planting areas in Sao Paulo, other states today and tomorrow. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.